Thanks for tuning in for this week's live Q&A. It's an absolutely beautiful day for doing a bit of beekeeping, so stay with us. We'll be using our new Superlifter. We'll be harvesting a little bit of honey and we'll be answering your questions. And if you've got answers to other people's questions, please chime in. It's really helpful. It's beginner beekeeping Q&A today, which is the start of the month. We like to dedicate a live Q&A to beginner beekeeping questions because sometimes it's hard for people to ask beginner questions, but we all started off as new beekeepers once, so no such thing as a silly question. Chime in, let us know what's on your mind, and we'll try and answer those. So questions in the comments, and Trace, which is a familiar voice if you've ever phoned up our customer support, should be reading out those questions and I'll answer those. Now, I'm just having a look at what's going on in the hive by opening the side windows, which is really helpful. And straight away I can see that there's a bit of honey because the bees have capped it, but there's also the bees are showing signs of uncapping and eating some honey. So that's showing that there's not a whole lot of nectar coming in and the bees are a little bit hungry. Now last week we had a concern from a beekeeper saying you're promoting people to over-harvest their hive and not leave enough honey for the bees. And of course, honey is the bees' food. It is their carbohydrate that they're storing for times in need. But what we find is the exact opposite, where people with flow hives are very tuned in to what's going on because they can look through the windows, see what the bees are doing and see when it's an appropriate time for harvest. And also, people can just harvest a single frame if they want to, or even part of a frame, and we'll show you how to do that now, which is very different to conventional. So conventional harvesting, I used to take the boxes off 40 or so hives, dedicate many days to processing all of that honey in the conventional way. And while you're in there, you're going to take all of the frames, otherwise it's just not efficient. You're never going to get the centrifuge going, the decapping line for a single frame. With a flow hive, that's very easy. So that means you can change the style of harvesting to just harvesting a little bit, how much you might need for your family, and leaving the rest for the bees. And it's quite easy to do that just by inserting the little key part way in instead of all the way. So if you've got your key here, then if you insert it halfway, you'll be harvesting just half the frame and we'll leave the rest for the bees. So you'll be taking out the little cap at the bottom, inserting your tube, and these are our new little honey jars with different labels depending on different designs here, different colours depending on the colour of your honey. So you might like to use a light colour so halfway is about there. If you've got dark honey, you'll want a light coloured design, okay. And then I'm turning that, and what you'll find is we're harvesting just this half and leaving the rest for the bees. So you could harvest a quarter of the frame, or you could harvest half of the frame, or you could harvest just a couple of frames and leave the rest for the bees. So really quite versatile like that. And that way you're not overstressing your colony. So if you've got questions, put it in the comments below. Pretty soon we'll see some honey coming out. It has been quite a cold night here. We're now in our winter here in the southern hemisphere. And the edge frames tend to be a little bit cooler and it'll be moving a bit slower. But of course, we're not having to do any work. It's just time to watching the honey come out. And the bees are already noticing that something's going on and they're starting to chew away at the cappings. And the whole process will then start again. So we're just seeing the honey starting to come down the tube now, and it's a beautiful light coloured honey. So if we've got a light coloured honey, I might swap for a dark coloured design. And that way we'll really see that beautiful design against the honey. Any questions coming in?
Yeah, see, this Terry is on YouTube and asking how often should you be going into the hive, or rather, should he say, how often should you not be going into the hive?
So great question. When you're beginning in beekeeping, it's a nice thing to really learn as much as you can. So generally, unless it's really cold, you can get in there and have a look at what's going on in the brood nest as much as you like. And there's some caveats on that. If you've introduced a new queen, you want to wait a week or so before you inspect the brood nest. But otherwise, feel free to get in there, learn as much as you can, observe as much as you can, and pretty soon you'll find it's quite addictive looking into the brood nest and seeing what's going on and staring in at the marvellous world of bees. So in terms of how much you do need to, that will really depend on what's going on in your season and also what pests or diseases you might have in your area and need to check for. So chime in if you're a beekeeper and let us know how often you need to inspect your brood nest and where you are in the world.
Thanks, Ed. And Jock's tuning in, and Jock's saying he often just takes a jar for himself rather than harvesting a whole frame and leaving nothing for the bees. So he kind of does that himself as well.
It's wonderfully versatile like that. Today we're just going to be harvesting half a frame and leaving the rest for the bees because they are a bit hungry. And we can see that through the windows. And the windows tell a story. If you look here often enough, you can see this pattern here is a checkerboard pattern where you've got cells that were all the way full and capped and then suddenly missing cells. That's a classic sign of the bees being a bit hungry, uncapping, removing that honey and using it to survive on. So for that reason, we're just going to harvest half a frame and leave the rest for the bees.
Right, Ali's wondering, Cedar, how do you add a second brood box to your Flowhive?
So adding a second brood box, what you'll be doing is taking off, well, it depends whether you've got any supers on already. If you're just deciding to go double brood before the honey super, then you'll simply be getting in your bee set, getting out your smoker. You'll be removing the gabled roof, inner cover, and putting your second brood box on top. So this is a second brood box here, and then when it's time, you'll be adding your honey super on top of that, usually with a queen excluder in between. So we've got plenty of videos showing you how to do all things beekeeping if you have a look at the beekeeper.org. We've also got a lot on our YouTube and Facebook channels. So while that honey's harvesting, we're going to get Sophie here to switch those jars. It's moving slow this morning, so she'll keep an eye on that. If you are going to walk away from a hive when honey's harvesting, do cover it up with some netting or some kind of kitchen wrap so that you don't end up with a jar full of bees. When they're hungry like they are now, it can be a time where they come around the back looking for the sweet honey. Okay, so next we're going to show you a brood inspection. And that'll be down here. We're going to use our Superlifter and show you how that works. For those that are new to the Superlifter, it's an invention my father and I came up with, and it allows you to easily open the hive, which was a pain point in beekeeping. And we've just got hundreds of amazing reviews coming in with people just overwhelmed with how it's solved their problems and allowed them to keep beekeeping and so on. Have a look at those reviews, it's really quite touching. So first thing you'll need to do is light a smoker, and I'll show you how to do that. If you're new to beekeeping, that's something you will need to learn. So it doesn't matter, people get kind of stuck on what you should put in a smoker, but I just tend to use what's around. So today we're going to use some garden mulch, which is, this is organic sugarcane mulch, but you can use leaves from the ground, pine needles, bark from trees. People sometimes just use cardboard. If you're going to use cardboard or paper, steer away from the glossy kind of prints because you don't want those chemicals blowing into your hive. Now, this mulch is really quite dense, so I don't usually use a bit of paper, but with dense mulch like this, it will help a lot to just light a bit of paper first, and that way it will be much easier to catch on to that more dense garden mulch. So you let it catch on fire first. If I stuffed it full of mulch right now, it would put the fire out and I'd have to start again. So once you've got a little bit burning, now the trick is just to put a little bit in first and get that going, and then just keep adding it slowly. Even I still make the mistake of stuffing it too quickly, get impatient, goes out, and you have to start again. Lovely. So you want to see some flames, don't burn yourself, wear your gloves if you're new to beekeeping. And another important thing is fire safety. Here in northern New South Wales, it's very wet at the moment, so we're not thinking fire at all. Some parts of our country are really quite dry at the moment, so make sure you are putting your smoker down on something like a metal garbage bin lid and even lighting it on that, so you reduce the risk of any embers catching some tinder on the ground. Keep puffing it till it's really smoking. You can take the opportunity to smoke your hands if you're going gloveless. However, if you're new to beekeeping, wear your gloves and give yourself a gentle, easy start until you're really tuned in with how your hives behave. And this does get hot too after a while, so bear that in mind. Beginner beekeeping Q&A, keep those questions coming in. We've got some nice, cool smoke. We can start loading up the smoker more now and closing that lid. Now next we're going to be blowing a little bit of smoke into the entrance of the hive, and then going to putting this lid down for a good fire safe practice here by putting it at the entrance like that, and I'll blow a few puffs right into the entrance, then put it down so that the returning foragers get a whiff of the smoker, and that will help change them into a nice calm mood, which will be beneficial for our brood inspection. So waiting for a minute or two is good. That smoker's only just been lit, so give it a few good puffs, really get it going, and then we'll show you how this Superlifter works. And the other thing I'm going to need is a hive tool. Now you might notice that I have a little magnetic clip here, which is something new that we've got. It's super handy. You can just do that and your hive tool is magnetized, and that saves it falling out of your pocket or anything like that. Super handy. You can put that in your pocket so you don't even see it like that, and it still works. Or you can put it on your sleeve, wherever you like. Today I'm going to put it just here, and it's quite satisfying actually. Okay, so next, this is our Superlifter. If you get it with the bag, it comes with this nice carry bag, and it's quite a simple process here, but bear in mind when you're setting this up, the bees start coming out without you even having to think about it, because it separates the hive for you as you set up the stand. So you need to don your bee veil. Make sure the center zip is up. The two zips side to side are done up, and the Velcro over that to stop any bees getting in to the hooded area. So to use this, it's quite a simple process, and we've designed it so everything happens easily and automatically for you. All you need to do is pick it up like this. Now you can use the handles as well if you want to make it even easier, but basically as soon as I grab these handles and spread my hands apart, it's ready to connect. So that's the position you want to connect in. You're here on these lower brackets. Now, if you've got screws from harvesting out, you'll need to put them in with your little tool, because the lifter needs a flat surface to work on. So one little adjustment there, and we're ready to go. So again, you're picking it up by these handles. That sets it up so you're ready to go, and that's step number 1 written here on the handle. Step number 2 is written on the lower brackets, and that's connecting onto your load point screws. Step number 3 is the upper load point screws. Now at this point you want to make sure they're all over the top, and as you lift this, notice it'll be separating the boxes for you, and it's quite easy. I'm just doing that with one hand, and that used to be a real pain with the chisel tool. Now, setting up your stand with your clicker, make sure this leg's all the way in so it's forming about a 90, and this is all the way up. And now you're ready to roll the hive over and start your beekeeping. Sometimes the queen excluder will stay on the top box and sometimes it'll come off. But there we go. Now, in a much easier way, we have access to our brood nest and we can start our beekeeping. We might just take that off, have a little quick look for the queen, and we'll lean that up against the hive as usual in case we've missed her. Now here we are. Let's have a look and make sure we've got a laying queen, which is one of the first things you do when you're looking at a brood nest, is make sure you've got some brood and some young larvae showing that there's a queen been laying eggs recently. If you've got questions, put it in the comments.
Oh, great, Seeds. I love Beginner Beekeeper. There's some really good questions coming in, and Bo's asking, Bo's up in Cairns and wants to know, how do I know if the bees are getting too hot? Bo says during the day the bees come out and cover the entrance and start to fan, and he's just wondering, should he put a vent in the top?
Okay,
he's up in Cairns.
That's a great question. So Cairns is up north here in Australia, which means it's quite hot, and I've just got a bee up my trouser leg, so I think I might remove that. Sometimes you can get a bee right where you don't want it. There we go. And there it is. Get that out before it stings me, if I can. Okay. Where is it? It's getting higher and higher, which I don't like. It's somewhere here.
What does it be?
The bee in my pants.
Well, people often wonder if you're the
happens sometimes. A full bee suit, which has the elastic around the ankles, will limit that happening. It doesn't happen very often, but it can happen. Now, straight away I'm seeing a lot of brood here, which is fantastic. This hive's going to absolutely explode. Now, I shouldn't lean that there because if there's a queen on this frame, it could wander up into the top box. More brood on that side, looking good. And there it is, bee out of pants. Successful. Can get very uncomfortable. Okay, so a lot of brood there, fantastic. So straight away looks like we've got a good layer. She's a keeper. So that is great news. We don't have our frame rest set up, but if we did, we could lean that on the frame rest for you to have a look. I'm going to have a quick look for the queen on that frame. Can't see her. Not that I need to find her, I can see she's laying well here. I'll just lean this here. If you want to have another look at that frame any moment, Callum, you can. Now, back to your question. Bees are incredibly resourceful in really hot climates and in cold. So you can have your hive out in the full sun in extreme heat, and your bees will go and collect water. They'll bring that water back to the hive, and they'll use that for evaporative cooling, for air conditioning, to keep their brood nest at that 35 degrees C range, which they need in order for the brood to survive. Now, if you're seeing a lot of bees all over the front of the hive, that is normal, when the bees are doing really well, there's a lot of bees and they need to clear out of the way for extra ventilation. And then the bees will fan, creating movement of air that comes up through the hive and then down through the hive and out. And while some beekeepers do put top entrances in for extra ventilation, I've found that the bees don't really like it. They just want to block up that entrance at the top so that they can better control, because if you've got entrances up at the top, then you've got natural convection happening and the bees can't control that. Whereas if there's a bottom entrance, the bees can use their fanning to fan the air up and down and therefore control the ventilation just how they like it. So for that reason we just stick to the ventilation being at the bottom. But if you want to give them a hand in those hot climates, you can make sure your adjustable ventilation is open at the back, or you can remove the tray altogether for maximum ventilation, and that will assist your bees in those really hot times. Some shade in the afternoon is beneficial also, but having said that, you'll often see a lot of beekeepers keeping their hive out in the full sun. If you've got a preference between full sun and full shade, I'd always go full sun, because it helps to keep pathogens away, like the chalk brood, which is a fungus that can affect your bees when it's damp and moist in shady areas. So the quick answer is, if they're really hot and you're in a really hot climate, maximum ventilation by removing the tray at the bottom and your bees will be fine. If there's no water around and it's really dry, you might like to make a water feeder with some pebbles in a dish and a dripping tap.
Right. Seeds, can a couple of people are asking, can you get beeswax from a Flowhive?
Yes, absolutely. Here's some beeswax here. So any hive you can get beeswax from. Now, if you had it in this configuration with just a single brood box, a single super, and you wanted more beeswax than you're finding in the brood nest, you could find some honey on the edges here that you could take away and utilize the wax, or you could let them build some wax up into the roof cavity, or you could add an entire box, or perhaps an ideal purposefully for collecting honeycomb, and then once you've eaten the honeycomb you can use the wax for those crafting projects. But let's have a look over on the edge here, out of interest, whether we've got any honey on the edges that we might like to take away for honeycomb and beeswax. So this is a good thing to do in the springtime. We're at the start of our winter here, so I won't be taking their stores away today, but let's have a look. What have we got here? We have bee bread in this section and honey in that section. So we could take that, however I will just leave that one for the bees. And we do have a tiny bit of brood on this side. But oftentimes you'll find on the edges you've just got some honey stores, and you can take that away and enjoy the honeycomb and beeswax. And you don't have to take it all either. With this naturally drawn comb method that we're using here, you can just cut out a nice shape, take that for a cheese platter, put it straight back in. The bees will just quickly fill that in and repair the comb. Have a look at all the colours of bee bread, it's super cool. The bees have flown out to the flowers, and there's a static charge on the bee, and they approach the flower and the pollen grains leap off the flower before they've even landed, covering their bodies in tiny little grains of pollen. They've hair all over them, including on their eyes, and then they brush all those pollen grains back to their back legs, and then they come back into the hive with these beautiful balls of pollen on their legs. You can see just there and there. See the orange balls? That's their pollen baskets. And then they'll dislodge them back in the hive, push it into the cells with their heads, build up quite a lot of pollen in a cell, then add a bit of honey and enzymes and ferment it into bee bread, which is the primary food for the young developing larvae. And look at this, I've just had this frame here. Look at the pollen that's fallen off the bees. A whole lot of pollen has dropped off as we've been talking, and the bees are finding a lot of pollen, which is fantastic. And you can see all the different colours of bee bread down there. We've also got a drone bee here. See how it's a bit bigger and the eyes touch together in the middle? Give us the thumbs up if you can see the difference between the drone and the worker bee there in size and their eyes.
Thanks, Sid. I think you mentioned this the other day actually, but Clinton's wondering about the queen excluder, and would it be a good idea to screw that to the super? He said he's seen drones and often worries that the queen's going to end up back up in the super. What do you think? You sort of mentioned something about that the other day.
Yes, you certainly can. And that would just save one more little operation when you open it and speed up your already faster method of inspecting your brood by having this queen excluder stuck permanently to there. Now, you can also experiment with no excluder altogether. However, some queens will lay in the flow frame, so you'll have to ascertain whether your queen is a flow frame layer or not by keeping an eye on that. Now, if you wanted to screw it there, then every time you opened it, it would end up there like that. And as you say, you'd limit the chances of the queen getting into the super. However, we haven't found that the bees migrate along the lifter and up to the super. We haven't ever seen that to be an issue with the queen making her way up here while you're inspecting.
Right. So do the bees ever attack?
Yes, bees are territorial. They are protecting their gold. They like to keep their gold at the back of their hive, so it's harder for intruders to get to it, be robber bees. If it's, they also have a long history of protecting from things like bears that are tearing apart their wild hives, and if we're not careful, they might think we're a bear coming into their hives. So that's why we use the smoker, which helps mask their alarm pheromone and has a calming effect. However, genetics is the main thing that decides whether your hive is more protective or less. And if you find there's aggressive traits that are bothering you, they're stinging people, then what you can do is replace the queen with some known genetics, which is, if you get a queen from a breeder, you'll find they'll breed for nice, calm, gentle genetics like this, where you can be here with the hive apart and the bees aren't attacking. A nice, warm, sunny day like this is ideal. If you are inspecting this hive on a rainy day, then they'll likely get very grumpy about that. So that's another big effect. You can also have issues if your hive's queenless. Sometimes, but not always, they can show more aggressive traits when they're queenless. So if you're new to beekeeping, a good bee suit and your gloves is essential in order to have a nice, gentle way into beekeeping. Because it can be a bit alarming if you haven't got a good bee suit and the bees are starting to get aggressive.
Right. Cedar, Mel's wondering, do you ever move the bees from one hive to another?
Yes, a classic time we do that is we'll actually pull out a frame and move it to another hive which has lost its queen. So if we find a frame in another hive that's got a queen cell on it, that's fantastic, but if it's got eggs down the cells, that'll do, because the other hive will then likely turn one of those worker eggs laid down a cell into a queen. So if you've got a hive that's queenless, they haven't got it together to raise a new one, you can assist them by moving a frame from one hive to the other. We usually leave the bees behind though. However, you can take the bees with it. Sometimes they'll fight with the other colony and sometimes they won't. Keep the questions coming in. Beginner beekeeping today, no such thing as a silly question. Chime in and we'll do our best to answer those. If you've got answers to other people's questions, fantastic to see you chiming in and helping answer.
Great. This is a question in Jonesy's wondering, are the hives available in the UK and are they good for someone who's new at beekeeping?
Yes and yes. The hives are available in the UK. If you order today, it should be at your doorstep within a few days, coming out of our Netherlands warehouse. We've strategically put warehouses all around the world, so it has a quick shipping time to get to you. And our Flowhive is great for beginners because it has a whole lot of features which assist your beekeeping, and the big one, of course, is our flow frame invention, which allows you to harvest honey directly from the hive, like we're doing over here if you dial back to the start of the video. And that bypasses a whole learning curve, a whole room in your house dedicated to an extraction room, the big centrifuge, the decapping bench, the hot knife, the sieving buckets, the scrapers and everything. So instead, this is it, a small footprint where the extracting room's built right into your hive, and all you need to do is look after your bees, and if you get a good season, they produce an amazing amount of honey to share with your friends and family, and it's a beautiful thing. If you want some inspiration, have a look at Jamie Oliver's hives or Beckham's Netflix documentary. You can see his hives at the start there. A lot of beekeepers in the UK using flow hives, and almost half of our beekeepers are brand new to beekeeping and appreciate the way we've gone about solving problems in beekeeping, from honey harvesting to observations looking in the windows to the pest management tray down below.
Right, so you've got a question going. Obviously now we've got the Superlifter, but if you didn't have the Superlifter, how can you do inspections?
Okay, the old way of doing inspections, which we did for many years, is you simply lift this box off. Now if it's too heavy, if it's full of honey and very heavy, then you might need assistance from somebody else. If you're on your own, you can start taking frames out to lighten the load before you take the box off, and then you're doing your brood inspection. So we've got plenty of videos showing you how to do that if you dial back to last year's or prior live brood inspections.
Great, and look, a few people asking, we've sold the first lot of Superlifters out, so the second shipment is about to arrive. Hopefully in Australia we'll start shipping it maybe hopefully next week, and in the US scheduled almost a similar time. So sorry for the delay, but it's not too far away for getting those Superlifters out to you all.
So yes, it's been exciting to launch the new product, have it received so well. Have a look at the reviews, it's absolutely incredible and very touching, because often lifting those heavy boxes off is the thing that stops people beekeeping, and they love it but they can't lift the hive anymore, or they couldn't lift it to begin with, and this allows them, the Superlifter allows them to continue beekeeping, which is fantastic, and also provides this level of inspiration. And I notice it for myself, even though I'm fit and able to lift off the boxes, it's still prohibitive because it's heavy, it's awkward, it's hard work. And having the Superlifter, you can just wander up and easily open up a hive. There's this inspiration to look after your bees that wasn't as prominent before.
Cedar, how's the Flowhive coping with the Varroa mite here in Australia?
So far we're doing well here. The Varroa mite's in our region now, and we've got mites in our hives, but they're not building up yet to the numbers that are detrimental. But it's a really important thing to keep an eye on monitoring those mite levels, so you can make educated decisions on when you need to put a treatment in to reduce the numbers. And in some areas you're getting mite bombs, which is where wild colonies are dying out from the mites. Your hive goes and robs the remaining resources and brings back the load of mites. So really important time over the next year or two to monitor those mite levels and make sure you're taking action so that your hive doesn't die out from Varroa mites. Now that's new to us here in Australia, so if you're in an area that's had Varroa mites forever, chime in, let us know what you do in order to look after your hive and protect them from Varroa mites.
Great. So it's just a question that we do get asked, another one quite a bit on beginner beekeeping, is when you were harvesting before from the flow frames, does shifting the comb hurt the larvae?
The answer is no, because we have our queen excluder. So you've got the larvae down here in the bottom box. This is where the queen's laying, and you can see down the cells here, or you can see the brood here. That is the larvae in their pupae phase, growing their wings and going through their metamorphosis. Now, there is no moving parts in these frames. These are just wooden wax, like it's always been. Now you come to our top box here, and you've got our flow frames, which do have moving parts for honey harvesting, but in between you have the queen excluder. So when this is in place, the queen can't get up there and lay eggs in your honey harvesting area. So the answer is no. The harvesting with the flow frames won't harm bee larvae, unless of course you've got the queen up the top here, which is rare, but it can happen. If you see that, you'll need to put the queen down below here in the brood box where she should be.
So getting started, Cedar, for beginners, what's the best way to get started, and how do you get your bees?
So it depends what type of learner you are. So if you're like me and you just like to jump in and learn as you go, then I'd recommend just getting your equipment, putting it together, putting whatever coat you want on it, and ordering your bees, and make sure you're getting a good bee suit and your smoker. Choose a nice warm sunny day, move your bees into your hive, look after them, and they'll grow from there. Now I'll go through that a little bit more about the different ways to get bees, but back to your question about what's the best way to get started. I just like to jump in and learn as I go, and when I need to find out something, I'll do some research. Now I like online training videos. That's one of the reasons why we created the beekeeper.org, which is an online training course made to take you from square one right through to a really deep knowledge in beekeeping. Experts from all over the world contributed to that, so that's a fantastic way. Or you can look at our countless live stream videos on our YouTube channel, our Facebook page. A lot of questions answered there, and that way you'll be on a rapid learning curve, which is exciting because there's just so much to learn in beekeeping, and it's a fascinating world. Now, if you're the type of person that likes to really be educated before you start, you might like to have a look at the beekeeper.org before you start, or you might like to purchase some books and read those, which we do have some recommended reading on our website as well. So, like I said, I just like to jump in and get going, but it's up to you on the way you learn. Now the Flowhive is fantastic for new beekeepers because we've got windows on the hives, we've got a levelling system on the hive, we've got a pest management tray, we've got easy honey harvesting, so you don't need to dedicate a room in your house to honey harvesting, and all of the equipment that goes with it. So we've really simplified a whole lot of things, both for looking after bees and honey harvesting, and our Superlifter makes it easier again in order to do your inspections like this. So let's pull out another frame and see what's going on, just out of interest, not because we need to, but because we're here and the bees are being patient with us. They don't seem to mind us taking out their frames today and looking in at their world. So this frame down here had a lot of capped brood on it, and what do we have here? Now if you want to get a good look at a frame, you actually need to shake the bees off, and I'll show you how to do that. First of all, I'm just having a quick look for the queen out of interest, trying to pick up her movement. It's often through her movement that you spot her. She moves a bit differently to the other bees because she's got bigger legs. Okay, no queen there. And to get the bees off, it's a short, sharp shake. Most movements in beekeeping are nice and calm, but to get bees off, you need to go like this. And there you go, most of the bees off. And look at that. that bee was just emerged out of the cell as we watched. That was her first steps in the hive, and see how she's lighter in colour and a bit furry. That's her first steps around on the brood comb, and she's got a bit of an interesting start in the broad sunlight. But there we see another bee chewing its way out, so it's gone through its metamorphosis and it's ready to get out, and in a few minutes it'll be out in the hive ready to do some of the chores. Here's another one just emerging, so super cool to watch. So it's gotten a little bit stuck, but over time it'll pull itself out of its cell. Another one chewing its way out here. So what we've got is brood that is fairly advanced. It's emerging on this frame, and then we've got eggs down the cells which look like tiny little grains of rice. The queen's been laying and the brood pattern will fill out again. And on the other side it's similar, with bees emerging. Any more questions?
Yeah, Marcella's tuning in from New Jersey in the US and was trying to decide where to place their beehive. The location they're leaning towards has sun at noon in the middle of the day during summer and gets more sun directly during the winter. Do you think that would be a good spot to place your flow hive?
In an ideal world, if you give them some afternoon shade in summer, that would be absolute perfection. However, if you've got a choice between sun or shade, I would always go full sun, because that will help keep pathogens like chalk brood away with that nice warm sunshine warming up the hive. So oftentimes as a backyard beekeeper, we're making choices in a bit of a priority order, and probably the main one is make sure the flight path isn't pointing right where people walk. You don't want accidental stings for your guests as they walk to your house, by bees getting in their hair and so on. So just choose a spot where the bees can fly up and away. Ideally you've got a couple of free meters in front for them to fly up and away in their flight path. Now, having a look here, I don't know if you can see that, but give us a thumbs up if you can see the shining larvae down the cells. So that's the larvae stage or grub phase. It's like a stationary caterpillar. The bees will feed it, and then on day 11 it'll spin a silk cocoon around itself. The bees will cap that off and it'll start its metamorphosis, growing its wings, its legs, its eyes, and everything it needs to be a worker bee.
Nolan's in Arizona, Phoenix, Arizona, and has a new hive, and wondering, Cedar, do you think they should be feeding them?
So in your time of year, we're just in our winter, so you're just coming into the summer, so luckily you've got plenty of forage around. So if you find though that for whatever reason the flowers aren't flowering and there's no honey stores in the hive, then feeding them is a good idea. So here we've got honey stores around the edges, so we know they're not going to go hungry. If all of this was empty around the brood nest and there was no honey in the super, and the hive was very light when you tried to pick it up at the back, then feeding them some sugar is a good idea to keep them going until the flowers start again. Lots of different ways to do that. One super simple way is just pour some dry sugar on top of the inner cover and take the plug out of the inner cover. So that's in the roof cavity up here. Or you can cook up some sugar syrup and put it in any type of feeder you like. A Ziploc bag with some pinholes in it up here in the roof is a really quick, easy one to make if you're in a hurry. Okay. Beautiful. So this hive's doing well. We've got honey stores, we've got brood in various different phases. We must have a laying queen here somewhere. I haven't spotted her, but that's okay. We haven't been through all of the frames. there's only a few reasons you need to actually find the queen, but it's always fun to hone your queen spotting skills. Keep the questions coming in. Beginner beekeeping, so chime in.
Cedar, how do you know when to add the super box, the flow frame box?
Okay, so we recommend waiting till they're using every frame in the brood box before adding the super, because that way you're limiting the space in the hive and right sizing it for the colony. If you add a box when they're only partially use these frames, they'll still be spending some weeks or months finishing off the frames in the bottom box, and all you've done is add extra space that they don't need, which will make it harder for them to keep their brood nest at their perfect temperature. Now, depending on how cold it is will be whether that creates an issue or not. In the more temperate climates where it's warmer, you can go ahead and add this earlier, but as a rule of thumb, wait till the bees are using all of these frames, either drawn out the wax in them, like you see in these frames here, before going ahead and adding your flow frames or your honey super.
Great. So Cameron's just wondering, before you put this hive back together, can you show the difference again between the honey filled and the brood filled on the brood frames?
Absolutely. So let me see, let's pull out a frame and have a look at that. So shaking the bees off again to get a really good look. Now, you can see here the difference between honey and capped brood. Now, the older the frame is, the darker it will look. Here, this frame is at medium age, if you like. It's been around for a season or two, and it's a kind of a light brown colour, heading towards darker brown in these regions. When it's really dark brown, it's been used for a long time. It's not necessarily bad, but it might be time to start cycling it out to the edges. So that also changes the colour. But here we have honey that's been around a while as well and is looking dark. It sometimes looks light, but in this case it looks dark. And here you've got the brood. Give us the thumbs up if you can tell the difference between honey capped and brood capped, and that's the worker brood. Again, you've got it in this region. Worker brood going through their pupae or metamorphosis phase, and here you've got the honey. And if we dig the hive tool in here, you can see beautiful honey.
Fantastic. Seeds. Now, suggestions on painting your hives, whether it be the western red cedar or the araucaria, the hoop pine, what do you recommend for people when they're getting started on their beekeeping?
Okay, so with our wood choices, we find the western red cedar is the most durable, and you can get away with using the outdoor decking coats, and there's a variety of them from your hardware store. This is a darker one, so this is a western red cedar hive with a darker deck coat on it, and that will last the longest before it needs some TLC. The hive, if you point the camera straight down there, Callum, that's a lighter coloured decking coat. So if you're wanting to keep your hive looking like wood, then you'll need to use the cedar wood, western red cedar, and then your choice whether you apply deck coats or let it just naturally grey with no coat at all. If you're choosing the other wood types like the araucaria, then you'll want to paint it like you see these beautiful hives here. And you can get carried away with your artworks. It's a nice family project. Get out the paints and use some outdoor hard-wearing house paints, and that'll give you your longest longevity there with the other wood types. But if you do want the natural wood look, then choose the western red cedar wood, which has antimicrobial, antibacterial properties in it, which tends to keep the rot away, and it can last a very long time.
And saying that, Cedar, the other question is if you've got the hoop pine hive and you do want to stain it, why are you not able to do that?
If you do put a stain on the hoop pine hive, it'll look good for about 6 months, and especially if you're in a wetter climate, about that mark you'll see the mildew coming in. And we get some very disappointed customers who have tried that and then the hive looks very mildewy. Doesn't affect your hive's performance, but it just doesn't look great to have that black mildewy look all over your hive. At that point, you should probably get out the sandpaper, or you could use some oxygen bleach to really give it a rub and scrub, and then go for an outdoor house paint to give yourself a long lasting good looking finish.
Right. And best times to harvest cedar, is it better to do it in the morning, the afternoon, or before sunset, or doesn't it matter?
So conventionally you're looking mid-afternoon, well, mid-morning to mid-afternoon on a nice warm sunny day, because you're harvesting by pulling out all the frames and taking them back to a processing shed. With the Flowhive, it opens us up to harvesting any time of day. So that is really neat, and especially if you just want to harvest a little bit, any time of day is fine. If you want to harvest a lot, then you're probably better off earlier in the day, so the bees have got a bit more time in the day before a cool night ahead. Harvesting in any fashion, actually, whether it be conventional or Flowhive, you do often end up with a bee beard at the front of the hive as they clear out of the way to repair comb and control the moisture, humidity content in the hive. And if you are in a really cold climate, you don't want those bees hanging out there necessarily overnight, especially if it's got a rainy forecast. So that's the only time when you might want to be thinking about it. If you're in a cold area and it's rainy, harvest earlier in the day, but otherwise most times you can harvest any time of day with the Flowhive.
Great, and just a few people tuning in about where do you get them and do we ship to your country and the new products and things. Check the honeyflow.com website, and also if your country or you can't find out how to where to ship it to, just contact our fabulous customer support team and they'll can make up quotes and do different things like that. So you can just email them, you can chat, you can call on the phone, you can send us a letter, a telegram, whatever you want, and we'll get back to you on that one.
So here we have
know what a telegram is.
a boy bee, a drone.
Ooh.
So give us a thumbs up if you can tell the difference between the drone and the worker. Now let's see if we can get a worker and a drone close by each other by herding this bee down. Or let's just bring this drone up to where this bee is. Drones don't have stingers, so you can pick them up, but see how the drones are bigger and their eyes touch together in the middle. If we put this frame down here, we'll be able to get a few more bees on it and see the difference between the drone, which is the male bee, and the worker bee, which is here, quite a lot smaller. And that's a brand new worker bee, looking fluffy and taking its first steps. And the drone has eyes that touch together in the middle, so that's another way you can tell the drones, the male bees. Okay, we're going to start to put this hive back together, and we could go and see how our honey jars are filling up. We're just harvesting a tiny bit of honey today and leaving the rest for the bees, because we can tell they don't have a huge amount of nectar coming in, so therefore we don't want to harvest too much of their honey. When we're putting the hive back together, we like to try and do it in the same order, and if we've forgotten, just make sure you're not pressing comb against comb, and that's the main thing. And generally the brood goes in the centre and the honey towards the edges. And if you've been standing around talking too long, your smoke has probably gone out, so we need to put some more fuel in there just by popping the lid with your hive tool so you don't burn your hands. Being careful as you add it that you don't burn your hands on the hot smoker. Give it a few puffs and that should reignite. There we go. And you can close that lid again like that. and away we go. Smoke's helpful for calming the bees, but also clearing bees out of the way when you're manipulating the comb so you don't squash them. So I'm smoking the end bars as I close them and trying to find the place where these frames go. So we knew that one went on the edge because that was the one we were showing for honey and pollen stores there. So we've got bee bread, pollen down the cells, and then honey there. Now if you were to choose a frame to get a piece of honeycomb from, you could simply cut out a piece here, take that for a nice cheese platter, and the bees would fill that in quite quickly again. And you could use the honeycomb for your crafting projects. Okay, so we know that one went on the edge, so we can put that one back there. And sometimes you can tell from the burr comb which frame went where. But if you've forgotten, as said, no problem, just make sure when you do put the frames back in, you're not squashing comb against comb, or the hive beetles might take advantage in that area where the bees can't look after that area. Okay, so we're pressing the frame sideways with our hive tool like this, and what we're going to do is drop that last frame in right there in a nice, slow, gentle way. It's the first frame to pull out and the last frame to put back that is the hardest because there's tight tolerances and you can only go vertically. So I want to do that nice and gentle. Once you've got the first frame out, you can go sideways, which makes it a lot easier to get the frames out. We're checking there's no bees under the end bar and pushing it down. Now we have the brood nest back together, but we want to make sure the spacing's correct for the bees, especially if you're doing naturally drawn comb like we are here, by getting your hive tool and levering across so any excess space is on the edges. So there, again, here. And now we're going to show you how to close up your hive using our Superlifter and just how easy that is. It used to be a process of picking up the box and trying to get it back on without squashing too many bees. Now we can seize this moment. We're making sure there's no bees in this area. That's the only spot that's going to close when you close the hive, is right here, and then the rest is a controlled, slow closure. So see that bee there? It's going to get squashed perhaps, so I'll remove that, and then there it goes. But notice there's still a gap here for the bees all the way along. And using your Superlifter, you can go as slow and as gentle as you like. You can brush the bees away, you can smoke the bees away, and just slowly close that. Make sure that bee's getting out of the way, and that way it's much more gentle for the bees and much easier for you. And that's it. Our lifter then comes off like that, and you've got it there ready to go in the next hive, or you can pack it up like that and put it back in the bag. Now let's go and have a look at our honey harvest. Now we only harvested about half of our frame because we wanted to leave the rest for the bees. We can see through the windows that the bees are a bit hungry. They don't have a whole lot of nectar available to them, but we could see there was ripe honey capped in the window, so we harvested some of those frames. Now you can see here we should have covered up this jar while we were gone because a couple of bees have jumped in to the honey jar. No big deal, we can put them back on the landing board for the bees to clean up. But look how much honey we've got from half a frame of honey. So you can see there we've harvested half, and you can see the difference between the harvested side and the non-harvested, and the bees are already going about their business, starting to recycle the wax and repair those cells, and the whole process starts again. So if we wanted to rescue those two bees, all we're going to do is use our key to put them back on the landing board. Now we're going back to a 90. We're going to rescue them like that. And if we put them on the landing board there, you'll notice that bees will be very quick to clean them up and they'll be just fine. There we go. Now, look at that. Perfect 4 jars of honey from half a frame. Now I'll show you quickly. Woohoo, didn't smash, that's good.
Good jars.
Yeah, we're just trying to show you how good our new jars are. We'll put that back up there. I've actually, in how many years? 10 years now of harvesting honey, putting them on a roof, I've never knocked the jar off, so special moment. If we want to close this off, our key goes in the top and we turn it like that back to a 90, and what that does is push all of the cells back into the cell form position for the bees to recycle that wax, and the whole process starts again with them storing their nectar. Now if you just do a quick close like that and move on, you might find that the parts close but bounce back up, and you might get some wobbly shaped cells which the bees will probably still use, but you end up with a lot of wax in the flow pathway, which could cause things like honey spills later inside the hive. So for that reason, best practice, leave that in the closing position, which is at a 90 like that, in the top slot for a minute or two while you're packing up, and that way you make sure all of those parts go back into their hexagon shapes. Thanks again for all of your great questions. Today we were just harvesting a small amount of honey to demonstrate how easy that is with the Flowhive, and that's really quite different to conventional, where it's such an ordeal to harvest in the conventional way. You're usually taking all of the frames and from multiple hives and taking them to do some batch processing. It's not efficient to harvest just part of a frame in the conventional way, but it's a really nice advantage of the Flowhive, is being able to harvest either a single frame or even part of a frame and leave the rest for the bees. Thank you very much for all of your questions. If you've got answers to other people's, chime in. It's amazing to see that global conversation going about bees, the importance of bees and the importance of looking after bees. So thank you. Let us know whereabouts in the world you are and what type of honey you get in your region. Thanks for tuning in. Let us know what you'd like us to cover next week, and we'll be back with another show and tell.